Hello guys, today's story is, my friend and I found the abandoned church behind our town. Behind our town is a massive hill, stretching out either side with a forest of thick cedar trees at its edge. There's a rumor of an old church hidden behind it, and it's said that inside is a fountain that has special powers. It's more of an old wives' tale that gets passed around the town. That night, my friend and I decided we were going to find it. How the hell are you going to sneak out? Your parents are super strict, Claire said, resting her chin in her palm. I shrugged. And if they find out you're gone, you're going to be grounded for a month. She drummed her fingers lightly on the bench. Well, we could go during the day, I said, rolling my eyes. Claire said, with a playful glint in her eyes. I tiptoed around the question. Her nose wrinkled in distaste. I leaned in. She tilted her head slightly, eyes fixed on the ground, unfocused. They'll be too drunk to notice. She tugged at her jacket sleeves, trying to pull them over her hands. Her lips curled into a smile. The bell for next period rang out, and I slung my backpack over my shoulder. I asked as she dragged her satchel off the seat. She narrowed her eyes, grinning. That night at the dinner table, my dad sighed, picking at his food. His eyes shifted to me. I kept my head down. You're falling behind. He glanced at my mom. My dad interrupted, shoving food into his mouth. I pushed food around my plate. Whatever her name is, she's a bad influence on you. He was starting to raise his voice. My mom scolded him. All I'm saying is, he put his knife and fork down. Your goal is to get good grades so you can get into a good college and make something of yourself. I grunted. He muttered. My face felt hot. I clenched my fists. My mom said, her words short and sharp. I stood up, pushing the chair away and storming upstairs. My dad called out to me, but I ignored him. I ran up the stairs and into my room, slamming the door. My phone buzzed. Claire. Hey, I snuck out early. I could still feel the anger burning. I slid the phone into my pocket, threw my jacket on and opened my window. Pushing the mesh off, I carefully slid out and put it back down. The roof creaked as I crept down it, careful not to slip or make any noise. My knees screamed as I dropped into the backyard. I glanced at the kitchen window and heard my parents arguing. I ducked into the bushes, then climbed over the fence into the alleyway next to our house and jogged towards the hill. My jacket did little against the cold night air. It took me about 10 minutes of walking to get to the sign, just outside of town. Claire was standing beneath it, smoking. The dim light of the embers illuminated her face softly in the dark. I asked, approaching the sign. She held it out to me. I caught her gaze, and she looked away. I said as casually as possible, I stole it from my dad. She took a long drag before dropping it and stomping it out. I stood there for a moment, thinking about what my dad had said. She gestured towards the hill. I murmured. We climbed the hill, stopping occasionally to catch our breath. At the top, we could see the forest stretch out. Tall, dense trees crowded for miles. I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw it was my dad. I clicked the phone off and slid it back into my pocket. Claire said, looking over at me. I sighed. Her voice pushed clouds into the cold air. Fuck 'em, I said, kicking a rock down the hill. Claire smiled, as if I had said something she had been thinking for a while. We set off into the forest, using our phones as flashlights. I ventured, shining my light around in the darkness. Claire laughed. She teased. My face felt warm, I said, stumbling my words. Claire said, laughing nervously and throwing a rock she had picked up. A moment of silence fell over us as we pushed further in. I hope you remember the way back out, I said, half joking, half worried that she might not have been paying attention. She said, turning to look at me. My face dropped. Her lips curled into a smile. I'm fucking with you. I let out a sigh and laughed. Fuck you, dud. My foot snagged on a tree root, and I went tumbling down a hill. Claire called my name, running down after me. I hit something hard at the bottom. A wall. I groaned, grabbing my side in pain. Claire ran to my side, helping me sit up. Are you okay, dude? I clenched my jaw. I'm okay. She stood up and took a few steps back. Oh, her voice trailed off. I stood up slowly and turned to face where she was looking. The church. White clapboard siding, though the paint had long since started peeling and graying in the damp climate. The steeple rose up, its oxidized copper roof catching the beam of my light in a dull orange glow. The pine forest pressed close on every side of the building. The double doors sat partially open. My words caught in my throat. Me and Claire exchanged looks before she took a deep breath and stepped towards it. She pressed on one of the doors, pushing it inwards and creeping inside. I hesitated, looking around the forest, before finally entering behind her. The inside was overgrown, with trees growing through the broken windows. Grass and weeds were pushing through the floorboards. There was a damp smell that hung in the air. Rot and earth and something older. "This is creepy as hell," Claire whispered, walking down the aisle, looking up at the ceiling. I followed behind her, looking between the pews. They were all either warped, broken, or flipped over. Claire clicked her tongue, stopping at the altar. I paced over to a closet and pulled the door open. Dust exploded outwards, sending me into a coughing fit. I shone my light inside, revealing old robes, some Bibles stacked lazily in the corner, and a large concrete slab. I called over to her. She walked over, peeking inside. "Spooky," she said, touching the robe with her fingers. I pointed at the slab. She grinned. We pulled it out, dragging it along the floorboards. Underneath was a round hole, with a passageway that led down. A rusted metal ladder disappeared into the dark. I said, nervously shining my light down the hole. Claire bit her lip, deep in thought, before looking at me and grinning. Before I could react, she began climbing down the ladder. It creaked and groaned as she descended. "Fuck," I muttered under my breath, climbing down after her. The air grew heavier as I descended. The ladder didn't feel stable at all, and I was worried it would break at any moment. My palms were slick against the cold metal rungs. It was a long way down, taking about a minute to reach the bottom. The hole opened up into a hallway made of stone. Claire was waiting at the bottom, shining her light around the small space. I wasn't typically a claustrophobic person, but the walls seemed to squeeze inwards. The ceiling was low enough that I had to duck my head slightly. The stone was damp to the touch. Claire murmured. I replied. She turned, awkwardly shifting to fit her shoulders in the small space. She flashed a reassuring smile. I didn't feel very reassured. I asked, trying to keep her from continuing down the corridor. She just rolled her eyes and smiled. I took a breath and followed her reluctantly. The hallway stretched on. Our footsteps echoed strangely against the stone. The beam from my phone light seemed weaker down here, swallowed by the dark before it could reach very far. Finally, the corridor opened into a kind of atrium, a circular room with corridors branching off in multiple directions. Claire laughed in disbelief. I had to admit I was pretty impressed. I paced around the room slowly. The stone walls were smooth, almost polished. There were markings carved into them, worn too smooth to read. I asked, shining my light around. I laughed nervously. Claire turned her head to look at me. The air was thick and heavy. The atrium was completely silent. So silent I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. So silent I could hear Claire breathing beside me. Claire spun around. My heart dropped. Oh, it was. She turned and ran her tongue over her teeth and thought. She pursed her lips. I threw my hands in the air. She rolled her eyes. You're kidding. I couldn't believe how casual she was being. She teased. She caught my look of disapproval and she sighed. I let out a sigh of relief. I couldn't tell if she was joking the whole time. She spun in a circle, with her arm out, and finger pointed, and stopped on a random corridor. I rubbed my face with my hands. She started down the hallway, and after some internal debate, I followed. I asked, tracing my hand along the grooves in the stone. I sighed. All right, sorry, just trying to lighten the mood. Eventually the hallway opened up into a small room. It was an office, complete with bookshelves lined with binders and an old wooden desk, covered in paper and documents. Claire clicked her tongue. Shit, I groaned, shining my light on the documents splayed out on the table. They were mostly receipts, corporate jargon that I couldn't understand, some shipping manifestos. Claire pulled a binder off the shelf and opened it on the desk. Her eyes lit up. I looked over her shoulder at the contents of the binder. Pages and pages of photocopies of people's passport photos. What the fuck, I mouthed. She flicked through the rest of the pages, before closing it and grabbing another one. The next binder was filled with more photos. Claire ventured, sliding out a random photo and flipping it over. Richard Milson, she continued, reading the name on the back, written in black ink. My voice came out hoarse. "Yeah," she said, grinning. I pushed her playfully. "I don't know," she shrugged. She pushed me back, laughing. I muttered, "Claire, close the binder." "Claire, seriously, it's dangerous down here." I tried to command some urgency into my voice. "Okay," she sighed, crossing her arms. I argued back, her face twisted in disgust. "You know what? You're such a perfect fucking grade A student. Do you have a problem with me?" I yelled back. Our voices echoed loudly through the tunnels. "You have no idea how good you fucking have it, do you?" Claire was interrupted by a noise echoing from inside the tunnels. I spun towards the doorway, breath ragged from the argument. Claire pushed past me, her eyes wet, and stormed down the hallway, her light bouncing around in the darkness. I yelled, feeling my own tears streaming down my cheeks. I called after her, heart racing, not wanting to lose her in the darkness. She yelled over her shoulder. Her light disappeared ahead, and I picked up the pace, trying to catch up. "Claire!" I screamed after her, terrified of being alone. I ran out into the atrium, and it was completely empty. My breaths were fast, and my heart was racing. "Claire!" I called out, trying to listen for her. I knelt down, sobbing into my arms, feeling completely alone in the dark, silence being interrupted by my hitching sobs. I was so desperate for her to come back, I would have done anything. I sat there in the dark for minutes, trying to regulate my breathing, listening for any clues to which direction she went in. My head shot up, hearing Claire's voice echo from a corridor. "Claire?" I jumped up. After a pause, her voice called out again, seemingly from everywhere. I called out, nose still running. Her voice called out again, and I thought I could hear it coming from my left. There were 3 passageways it could have been, though, and the way her voice echoed, I couldn't be sure. I picked the middle corridor and took off, sprinting down the passageway. My light barely illuminated the space in front of me. I called out again. I came to the end of the corridor and into a much bigger room. It was another corridor with rows of doors on the left and right. My voice cracked. Silence. I thought I might have taken the wrong passageway. Until something slammed against the inside of one of the doors. I screamed, falling back, startled by the sudden noise. I called out again. A shiver ran down my spine when I heard her voice again. Claire's voice came from the other side of the door. I asked, into the darkness. My breathing was ragged, and I couldn't hear anything over my heart thumping in my ears. I slowly climbed to my feet and crept towards the door. A low, soft, crying noise came from the inside of one of the rooms. I hesitated at the doorway and pressed my ear against it. Claire's voice came directly from the other side of the door. My hand closed around the lock on the brass handle of the door. I hesitated, waiting for an excuse not to open it. I squeezed my eyes shut and unlocked the door, stepping back and shining my light. After a few seconds, the handle twisted slowly and the door swung inwards, with a long, drawn-out groan. I swallowed hard. Silence fell over the hallway. My light shook in my hands as I tried to keep it steady on the doorway. My heart dropped as a face slowly peered out from the doorway. Long, matted black hair, and a pale face with huge pupils peered out, revealing a gaping mouth with no teeth. I couldn't move. I couldn't even scream. I was completely frozen in fear, staring in horror, as it slowly slunk out of the room. Thin, frail hands crept over its face, shielding it from my light. It screamed, ear-piercing, guttural, a noise that shot me into action. I turned and sprinted down the hallway, screaming, absolute terror filling my body, adrenaline surging through me. I could hear something running behind me, bare feet slapping against the floor. I burst out into the atrium and picked a random tunnel and ran down it, hoping to lose whatever the fuck was chasing me. I came out in another room. I barely registered any details of the room, just running towards a door, partially open. It led down a set of stairs, and I hurried down it, careful not to fall. The smell hit me as soon as I hit the end of the staircase. I covered my mouth and nose, retching violently. The room smelt of rot, meat, and shit. Literal shit. I raised my flashlight to illuminate the space. The floor was stained red and black, and covering the walls were smears of what looked and smelt of blood and shit. I gagged and puked all over my feet. I dry-retched again, too scared to go back up the stairs. But unable to stay in the room any longer, I scanned the room for any other way out, but was only met with more bodily fluid-smeared walls. I couldn't take it. The smell was making my vision double. I ran back up the stairs. I slowly crept back through the door, scanning the room with the light before entering. I couldn't see the creature anywhere, and I crept further inside. The room had a wooden table, stained a deep red, with a bucket and a large plastic container underneath. I looked in the container for a weapon, but found only old wallets, car keys, and some random crap that looked as if a bunch of people had emptied their pockets inside it. I heard something from far off in the tunnels, and I stopped, going completely silent and still, listening to hear if it was coming towards me. When it went silent, I took a deep breath, saying a silent prayer and continuing to look. My eyes landed on a metal fireplace poker, and I lunged for it, picking it up and holding it close to me. I felt a little better having some kind of weapon, but the knowledge I'd have to venture back down the hallway to get out was so terrifying, I wondered if I'd ever leave. I felt tears on my cheeks again, and a lump caught in my throat. I had the overwhelming sense of guilt, remembering that Claire was down here with me, and I'd accidentally released something, and it was probably going after her now. I decided that I had to do something, even if the thing killed me. I had to save Claire. Hesitating for another moment, I squeezed the fireplace poker, cold in my hands, and went back down the hallway. I held it out in front of me, feeling the weight of it in my hand. The main atrium was empty, and the silence was deafening. I spun slowly in the middle, swinging my light trying to look down the hallways. My heart thumped in my ears, and I picked another corridor at random, creeping down it, poker raised. I made it halfway down the corridor when I heard something scream behind me. The same ear-piercing cry that would haunt me the rest of my life. I screamed too, taking off sprinting to the end of the corridor. I heard the bare feet slapping behind me, closer and closer. I screamed louder, pure fear and terror pumping through me. I ran straight into something cold and hard. My hands closed around it, the rungs of the ladder. I wasn't even afforded a sigh of relief. Hearing the thing closing in, right behind me, I threw myself up the ladder, phone barely hanging on in one hand, and trying to hold on to the poker in the other. My hands were greasy with sweat, and occasionally they would slip off the rungs. The ladder shifted below me, creaking and groaning as the thing seemingly climbed after me. The poker slid out of my hand, and I heard it hit something with a wet thump. The climb felt endless, pure panic being the only thing driving me upwards. I finally came out into the closet, pulling myself up desperately, still sobbing. I pushed the heavy concrete slab back over the hole. Still crying, I backed away from it, before sprinting through the church and out into the cold night air. Claire's voice came from beside the doors. She was leaning against the wall, clicking her lighter on and off. A mixture of fear, guilt, and rage washed over me, and I broke down crying, falling into her arms. She stood there, stunned. I couldn't speak. I couldn't even form coherent sentences. I just sobbed right into her jacket for a minute. "Oh shit, Bailey, are you good?" She nervously patted my back. I lifted my head, snot and tears covering her jacket. I cried. I yanked her arm and we climbed back up the hill. The entire way back through the forest, she wouldn't stop asking me questions. I ignored them and pulled her back through the trees, making her guide the way. She walked me back home. My heart dropped as we stood at the end of the street. Blue and red flashing lights illuminated my house. I ran to the door. Claire stayed at the end of the street. I burst through into the living room, where my parents were sat, holding each other. Mom crying as a policeman sat across from them. As soon as they saw me, they rushed over and wrapped me in a hug. I cried again, harder than I ever had before, harder than I thought possible. So hard that no noise came out, as if the pressure in my head would make my eyes explode. They had called the police soon after I snuck out. I'd been gone 3.5 hours. I struggled to figure out what to tell the police, eventually landing on a convincing lie, that I had gotten lost in the forest. My parents knew I had been with Claire, and I didn't care. I never spoke to her again after that night. I ignored her at school, and after a few days, she understood and left me alone. To this day, I still have nightmares about that church. and whatever the fuck is happening beneath it. Thank you for following our story today. If you want to see more, please like and subscribe.